Welcome to Spartan Up Podcast. We are here in Lake Tahoe at the Spartan World Championships recording today. Spartan Up Podcast, we are your grit and resiliency partners. We find incredible people all over the world that we can learn from and help you learn from how to make your life bigger, better, stronger, faster. I'm here with Anders Varner, our special guest today. He is from Barbell Shrugged podcast. Fantastic guy. Actually has a big part in what got this whole thing started with Spartan Up Podcast. Speaking of Spartan Up, Joe Sena, founder and CEO of Spartan Race, Johnny Waite. And Joe, you interviewed Kevin Ward, a head wrestling coach at West Point.
Guy's an animal. I got some stories for you.
I think wrestling really is one of those cultures that is very special, how hard those people work, the hours that they put into it. So building a culture around that, I think is something we can all learn from, and we'll dig into it when we get back.
You got to listen to this one because if you're looking to be the best version of yourself, within 4 minutes of being around Kevin and being in that West Point environment, after school was already out for the season, you're going to learn some things, and you're going to take them home and use them. Stick them in your toolbox. Spartans, I am here at West Point. Look at that. West Point Wrestling Room, toughest room at West, maybe the toughest room in the country. With Kevin Ward, the coach. You've been the coach 6 years?
That's right, yeah. Started my 6th season, yeah.
Toughest room in the country, maybe toughest guy in the country. I don't know.
It's probably in that room somewhere right now.
In that room?
Yeah, for sure.
Where'd you come from? Like, where'd that come from? For you to be here training that team, you must have a story.
Yeah, for sure. So, I grew up as a wrestler. It really kind of defined my childhood, and I had no choice. I had an older brother that wrestled, a dad that wrestled, and so I got into the sport at 5 years old, at an early age, and I enjoyed it.
Where were you? Where'd you live?
I grew up in Tennessee.
Okay.
In southeast Tennessee, just outside of Chattanooga, where wrestling wasn't insanely popular, and I think that's what kind of drew me to it a little bit. So I wrestled since I was 5 years old, went to some wrestling camps in middle school and high school, intensive style camps that were really tough, which I think really transformed my life then.
Were you pushing back at all do you have any memories at a young age where you're saying, this is just too hard?
I don't actually.
Really?
No, I loved it. The memories I have, and I wasn't always successful, but the memories I have that most stand out are I would go to these intensive camps as kids, right, and we would work insanely hard, at least what we felt was insanely hard at the time. Did my first one when I was 12 years old. And when I would come back home after a couple weeks at a camp, I noticed that I was different from my friends. Even at 12 years old, I could notice that, and that's what got me addicted. What difference is like not complaining about silly things anymore? Not complaining. I think taking pride in being really tired, or at least thinking that I was working hard enough to be really tired.
So being appreciative too of like, hey, this food tastes better because I know what it feels like to not have food.
100%.
Right.
I think that's what really drew me to the sport, was noticing that it made me different, and noticing that I thought differently than the people that I was around. And I took pride in that, and it was addictive, and I just wanted more of it.
But right out of the gate, you weren't great.
No.
And so what about losing? That didn't set you back mentally?
No, I think I was pretty fortunate with I won more than I lost, and then when I got to high school, I won a lot more than I had lost, and losing sucked then. It sucks now. It's never been fun, but I don't think it was ever anything. Good support system, coaches, etc., that losing was never, fatal for me.
What was Dad's technique? Because I'm a dad of 2 boys that you were allowed in the room, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And you could push too hard. I'm told, right? You could push too hard where the kids then run from it. What was your dad doing that was...
my mom passed away when I was a kid, so my dad had my brother and I. So he had his hands full, I think, just, having a job and being a dad. So being a wrestling coach on top of it, I think, wasn't something he was interested in having the time to do. So he was pretty hands-off from that standpoint. But strict in the fact that my brother and I always had to work summer jobs in high school. If we ever started a season, even when we were kids, 5 years old, we ever started a season, we were going to finish it. When I look back, I think those are the things that were most important to me, or at least most influential. If I was going to start, I was going to finish, and I was going to earn everything that I had.
And so you're working at 13 years old. You got a job. What was that first job?
My first job, my dad was a bricklayer, so he would get my brother and
we could end the interview now. You don't have to say anything. I grew up in a neighborhood like that where those were the toughest people I knew.
Yeah.
And my Monday, my boys in there are going to lay some bricks.
Yeah,
That's what they're doing.
and they can't wait for school to start again.
Exactly.
That's exactly it. So that was our first job, helping my dad with projects around, and then when we were old enough, actually working, at construction companies, laboring for the bricklayers.
So that changes everything because those are hard jobs.
It was a tough job.
Right? Not every kid gets to do that. But the neighborhood I'm from, very Italian neighborhood, I was just so impressed with the because it was a family business, typically, right? I don't know if that was the case with you.
They were family masonry businesses,
right?
Yeah,
and they're up early, and the trucks are running, and you're mixing cement. And by the way, if you screw that up,
it's you.
It's you.
Yeah, you're gonna hear about it.
Right?
Yeah.
That's worse than screwing up a situation on the mat. I mean, you got to jackhammer that your way out of that one, literally.
Yeah, I mean, I hate it, to be honest. I can say it now. I hated those jobs every single day. My friends were at the lake, or doing whatever, and I'm like, why am I working, and my friends are having all this fun. Right now, I swear, when my kids are old enough to work, they're going right back to work. If I can find some bricklayers, that's what
you'd make them do it.
100%.
I'm working on a parenting book, right? A Spartan parenting book. I'm going to have you look at it because you don't know as a parent if you're screwing things up, or none of us know until when the kids are 30, right?
Yeah.
But you turned out pretty good. How'd your brother turn out?
He's doing well. He's been able to chase his passion. I describe my brother. He's a cowboy. He wrestled too, but college wasn't for him, and he was just born 100 years too late. And he's a cowboy, He's bounced around Texas and Colorado and Oklahoma working on big ranches.
But work ethic?
I mean, he's working harder than I am. He's up saddling horses in the morning before the sun's up, and then going to work. So
you can. I mean, you're not born that way, I don't think, right? I think you learn that work ethic.
We could have this debate, for hours, but I think we're all, 100% nature, 100% nurture, and there's no real separating the two. It's a combination of both, but absolutely my work ethic was learned from my father, 100%.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I don't know what your opinion is, but one of the things we talk about in this parenting book is we just got too soft nationally. Obviously there's pockets of bricklayers here and there, but just overall, we're learning helplessness. I don't know what
I'm fortunate. I'm insulated from it. I get America's best at West Point to be able to work with. And I hear that, kids these days, and we hear that quite a bit. My peers in the coaching world will hear that, and I say, that's bullshit. I've got 50 guys in this room that prove all of those stereotypes wrong. I've got tough kids that aren't afraid to work, that want to serve, that want to do some pretty incredible things. So I'm fortunate. Maybe I'm not the expert to be talking to on that topic.
No, they self-selected. You've got a distilling process. You got the best of the best.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
But by and large, there's not a lot of parents that are making their kids work at 13 years old mixing cement.
It's very uncommon, because in the recruiting process, I see it. So if a kid tells me, what are you doing this summer? If they're not training all summer for a major competition,
not your kid,
or if they're not having a job, it's got to be one of the two.
Right.
If you're not working, or if you're not really training for a major competition, we're probably not going to get along very well.
Yeah, for the viewers out there and the listeners, when I walked in, Kevin had pointed out that there's no practice going on, and school's out. But yet the wrestling room was hot and full of kids.
Yeah.
And so he said, these kids are just coming in on their own. So I want to know what percentage are 20% playing at the lake, 10% at McDonald's. And he said, no, 100% of them are in the room. And so I was confused because he said, practice is over, right? And school's out, but yet all the wrestlers are in the room. So that just goes to show you the kind of kid you have.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, if they want to be on the team very long, it's going to be 100%. Yeah. It's kind of an expectation.
Yeah, so you're building a culture, or there is a culture here, I guess, that just breeds that.
Well, we could talk about that all day,
Let's
too.
Talk,
I think, I've got my philosophies and how I think about culture building and building an organization. For me, the organization is a wrestling team. It could be whatever else, but the culture's there. But if you don't sustain it, every single day, it takes maintenance. Every hour of every day takes maintenance. If you take it for granted, it's gone. And then you turn around and you're wondering, how did we get here? And even though you didn't intentionally sabotage your culture, if you don't intentionally nurture it and grow it, then you're going to end up.
So give me some examples for that. Selfishly, we grew from a little business to 500 people around the world, and I do feel sometimes like, wow, I lost touch a little bit with 42 countries and people everywhere, and
Yeah.
and so how do you do, like, give me some tips on that.
Well, I think, my thought process is it's drip by drip, and I visualize that I've got this bucket and I want to keep it full. And if I turn off the faucet, which is the communication, it's the discipline. If I stop putting these things in there, the culture runs dry. And so for me, it's just being intentional about having interactions with, I don't have 42 countries, I barely have 42 individuals, but it's having interactions with them on a daily basis.
Hang on one second, we got some noise. So let's go back to those intentional things. Communication, violent communication, in other words.
I love that.
Right?
Yeah.
So what, every week?
Well, for me, it's it's when we have access to our guys daily, I can talk to them before and after practice.
Right.
And
as a group, one
as
by
a group,
one?
no,
Okay.
as a group. And I probably spend, not probably, I spend as much time or more thinking about that 5-minute talk before practice and the 5-minute talk at the end as I do the whole 2 hours in between those. And now during the practice is when you're getting your individual interactions. But what we're doing when we're talking to these athletes before a workout, a training session, whether it's on the mat or run, a lift, is we're teaching them how to think. We're teaching them how we think, what's acceptable, what goes through your mind and as you're preparing for what's coming up.
On a calendar, are you saying tomorrow my talk is going to be this, or like do you prepare
I'm
those
not
talks?
that structured. I mean, for me, it's on my mind 100% of the time. I live it. And it's hard. I don't separate my work life from my life. I love every
It's
bit
so
of
funny
it.
you said that, because we said what film could we do on walking into West Point, and I had my whole family with me, and I said, everybody talks about separating work from your regular life, and I just meld it all together.
I can't.
Right?
Yeah. I tried. I was in a different career for a little bit, but I love what I do too much. And
Are you married? Kids?
married, 3 little kids.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So good. So I'm not crazy. At least there's another person that does it.
Well, you're not alone.
I'm not alone.
We might both be crazy.
There you go.
Yeah. Yeah.
So communication. What else?
I think the discipline. Most people think of discipline in negative connotations. I think discipline is just understanding the structure of what you do. Discipline is freedom. You hear that a lot. When you follow a plan, you have this freedom to really be invested and involved in it without distractions.
Sure.
So you're really free. So I think helping to create that discipline, and maybe one of the most important things I talk about a lot is it's what you praise and what you punish. And so praise is hugely motivating. And but what you punish can also really dictate the direction that you're going. Most people, when they think of culture, think, okay, the highlights really dictate the culture. And in my personal belief, it's the opposite. I think what really shapes your culture are the worst behaviors that you allow. Whatever's the worst thing that you allow is what really shapes your culture.
That's a great point. So if you don't immediately get rid of that stench,
Yeah.
it could ruin the whole kitchen.
So at West Point, peer leadership is fundamental to what happens at West Point. You're supposed to be able to call out your peer without fear, or at least get over the fear of doing it.
Sure.
So if there's a certain standard and somebody's not meeting it, all right, they're down here, and you don't call them out on it, what you've done is set a new standard.
Right.
By just not doing anything.
Right.
You have set a new standard that's lower than it was before.
No different than allowing your kids to get away with things.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
You've set new standards.
Yeah.
And so do you continue to raise the standard?
You sure hope. I mean, I would sure hope so. No, the standard, not everyone's going to be able to reach a standard of performance that their teammate is going to be able to. Some
Sure.
are better than others.
Right.
I think for me, it's more about expectation, devotion. How devoted are you to what you say that you want to do?
Yeah.
How honest are you about what you want to do and what you're doing to achieve it? I think those things. Hopefully, there's not a finish line there. Yeah. Hopefully, we keep going.
So communication, discipline.
Yeah. What you praise and what you punish.
What you praise and what you punish. I love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
All right, and that's applicable in the office. That's applicable at home, with the kids.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's right. Like I said, it's hard for me to separate life and work and the way I want to do things at work. I can't be a coach when I'm at home. I've got to be a husband and a dad, but there's so many similarities. It's hard to separate the two.
One of the biggest things I hear from everybody, just to wrap it up, is, Joe, how do you get the motivation? Not everybody's as motivated as you are. What would you recommend to those sitting on the couch right now?
I mean, for me, and I've heard you talk about it a lot, I understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. And once you know that, I mean, I think motivation is just a byproduct of being passionate. And it's not always, I think, find your passion can be maybe said a little bit too often, and it's a little bit too too cliche. I mean, you got to create your passion sometimes. It's not always just the easiest thing to do.
Bumping into it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, go out there and create it.
Yeah.
But for me, I mean, staying motivated, I coach, 50 athletes that have really high goals and they're motivated to achieve them. If I'm not motivated, I let them down. So for me, it's about being able to serve my athletes and help give them the experience that they came here for.
It's interesting because you're motivating the athletes, but they're also motivating you.
Like every day.
Right?
It's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so you're sitting out there on the couch, find somebody.
Yeah.
Find somebody and say you're going to meet them at 7 a.m.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden you got to show up.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Don't let them down.
No, I mean, the greatest athletes in the world have coaches.
Right.
Right? Everybody needs somebody that can help push them. Absolutely.
I found my new coach.
Yeah.
Thanks, Coach.
Absolutely. Thank you.
You're awesome. That was awesome.
I want to thank you for including me on these ones with these incredible wrestlers. It's been a big part of my life that I've been away from. And, man, you bring me right back into it with guys like this.
You got to thank Colonel Nye because he knew we were having the race at West Point, and he sent an email to I don't know how he does it, Colonel Nye, but anybody he sends an email to, they respond.
Yeah.
And a wrestling coach came right back. Colonel Nye walked us. Hard to get into West Point, by the way. Literally, IDs. He had to use his special government clearance, and we get in there, and the first thing Kevin says to me, which I'm sure you heard in the podcast, but really blew me away, was, this is a tough room. These kids, if they want to be good, they're working here, a couple times a day. And so I said, well, school's out right now. How come there's kids? How many kids are in there? What percentage is 10% or 20? He goes, no, 100%. I go, what do you mean? You just said. He said, no. If they want to be on the team, they want to be great. They're all in here working even when they're not supposed to.
That's something I took away is you want to find out how dedicated somebody is, make it optional.
Right.
And then find out if they show up.
Yeah.
If they show up because you told them to be there, they're there because you told them to be there. But if you make it optional and they don't show up, they probably don't really want to be there.
It reminds me of Shackleton's advertisement, right?
Yeah.
Right? Low rations, complete darkness, return unlikely, no pay.
But are you coming?
5,000 people showed up for the job.
Yeah.
But those were the 5,000 that get done.
Yeah, I think what's really cool about wrestlers is that life is so challenging, from virtually starving yourself and operating at the highest level of athletics and the mental piece. I mean, being wrapped up, some guy choking you out, like these are all realities that they face every single day, right? I think that's something that's very cool about just the culture that they create is like you have to show up every single day. And once you show up, then you have the option, how hard can I work today?
Yeah.
But there's this base level that everybody's here, everybody's bought in, everyone's going to show up every single day. And then once you get there, then the culture just elevates everyone so that we create excellence.
Well, and speaking of culture, and that's one of the things I love about this podcast is we don't, the people we interview aren't necessarily the people who are listening. You're not all wrestling coaches. You're not all business people. But you can always learn from the people. And the thing that I think everyone can take from this, he talked about building culture. I'm not going to paraphrase because you just heard it, but it isn't what you aspire to. It's the lowest thing that you will tolerate, the least you'll tolerate. Man, in all of our lives, like what are we tolerating day in and day out? And that's what's driving the culture
That
of
really
our
hit
family.
home. When I heard that really hit home.
Yeah. I think a lot of it comes down to really doing the self-work to understand what the core values of a team are. Like whether it's in your family and there's trust, kind of this idea of leading from a place of love or freedom, whatever that means to you inside your, like some of the things that we talk about in my family or in business. And, what is that lowest level? You're never going to come across perfect situations all the time, but the way that you respond to those and being positive and really looking for the best in every situation really comes down to the culture. So when you have somebody on your team that starts to turn things negative, or there's a lot of negative talk coming about partnerships or people on your team, it's very easy to pick that stuff out because it's not the normal.
It's not tolerated.
It's not tolerated, and it sounds terrible when everyone's positive, when everyone's trying to make the best of every situation, and then that negativity comes in. It's the nails on the chalkboard, and everybody recognizes it right away.
We had done a podcast with Theo Epstein. I don't know, Theo,
yeah.
Right? Red Sox and
He's
the Cubs.
done some things in baseball.
He's done some things in baseball.
Yeah.
And at a very young age. And so I asked, like, what was it? Was there anything that happened with the Red Sox that also happened with the Cubs, and that that's lightning in a bottle we could all take home? And he said, really, it comes down to one thing: when the whole team takes the blame for each other and gives the praise to each other.
Yeah.
He goes, then you got a working machine, but that's hard to do, right? Because people finger point, and it's me that did it, and I want to be on the news tonight. But when you can flip that, and Kevin's done it. I mean, that's a pretty tight wrestling room.
Yeah.
Well, and it's funny when we talk about teams because, you've got a team where you're all playing together like baseball or, hopefully business. But wrestling, you're individuals, but you'll never meet a stronger team than a wrestling team, even though your match is separate from my match, separate from your match.
Right.
You throw your match doesn't affect my match, but man, it's a strong team.
I always like to think about it, especially when it comes to business or family, like I have my needs, you have your needs, but if we all think we're at the top of the hierarchy, it's not going to work.
Sure.
We always have to have this higher experience, this higher being, this higher priority, which is the success of the unit that we all have to answer to, and nobody is above that. And if we can all find a way to really drive ourselves to the top and understand that the business is the thing we have to feed first, and everyone else will suffer until that thing is fed, everything else seems to fall into place.
I want to know whether you're listening on audio or you're watching on YouTube. You can go to Instagram, you can go to YouTube, put this comment. I want to hear from you. What is the lowest, if that's the right term?
What is it you're
tolerating?
tolerating?
What are you tolerating in your life that maybe you could think about? I thought about some things. I know Marion behind the camera thought about it. She's had us redo this take 6 times because she's no longer tolerating
exactly right.
mediocrity.
And
that's from the Kevin Ward interview. So,
sure.
So what are you tolerating out there? There was, I think it was Charlie Chaplin. Many of you listening or watching, actor from years ago said, "These are my principles. If you don't like those, I have others." And we don't want you to have other principles, right? You want to drive a stake in the ground. But what do you tolerate? We want to hear from you.
This is the thing. You're going to change this, and it's all going to change.
Yeah.